Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of the Journey Home podcast. And we are continuing in our series, Truths to Build Your Life Upon. And the truth that I want to share with you today is that we have a city whose architect and builder is God. Or we could say it another way, we have a city whose maker and builder is God. I'm sure that phrase is familiar to some of you, but it comes from Hebrews chapter 11, which is a well known chapter of the Bible. It talks about some of what many would consider the heroes of our faith, the great men and women um, who followed God faithfully, in the scriptures. And one of the men that it talks about is Abraham. And in verse 8, it says this: By faith, Abraham, when called to go to a place he would later receive as his inheritance, obeyed and went, even though he did not know where he was going. By faith, he made his home in the promised land, like a stranger in a foreign country. He lived in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. And then this verse 10, so amazing. He says, for he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and builder is God. So it's talking about, as I said, different men and women, of the faith. But in this particular instance, he's talking about Abraham and some of the choices that he made. And the Bible doesn't tell us a ton of his backstory, meaning, by the time we meet Abraham in the scriptures, he's already, at a good age, and we don't know what his life was like before that. But we do see some of the choices that he made to obey God, to believe God, and that's what the writer of Hebrews is referencing. He left his home even though he didn't know where he was going. He lived in tents. He could have lived a far more comfortable life if he had just stayed, in his homeland, his hometown. But he chose to step out in faith and follow God, even though he didn't have the full picture. He didn't know exactly what it was all going to lead to. But he knew that God was calling him, and he knew that, there was something better. And in verse 10, it really gives us a glimpse or an insight into his motivation. It's because he was looking forward to something else, something better, something that God was building. Um, Sometimes I think we look at, people that we admire, whether it's a biblical hero of the faith or just someone even more, maybe more from modern times that we look up to as an example of faith, as, so, and, and I think a lot of times we can just come to the conclusion that they made the choices that they made because they're just, unusually brave or unusually disciplined, or they're just strong, and sometimes we can look at them and then look at ourselves and think, I don't know if I could ever make those kind of choices, or I don't know if I could ever be that strong. And, I'm not trying to take anything away from them. I think, they were extraordinary people who made extraordinary choices, but at the same time, they're ordinary men and women, right? Um, and I believe the reason they were able to make the choices they made, it's because they understood something, or they saw something. Maybe literally saw it, in a vision or something, or maybe it was just they saw it with the eyes of their heart. But somehow their imaginations, their hopes were captured by something that was greater, and it's because they understood that greater reality that they were able to make the choices that they made. And so I believe that if we could also see what they saw, if we could also understand what they understood, if we could have our hearts and our imaginations captured by the same thing that they were captured by, then we would also live differently. We would also make different choices. And so in that same chapter, Hebrews 11, it goes on, as I said, to talk about different men and women. And then in verse 13, it says this: All these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. people who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has a city prepared for them. So, again, the truth that I'm wanting to share with you today is that we have a city whose architect and builder is God. And, we look at Abraham, we look at these other men and women of faith. At least the writer of Hebrews makes it pretty clear. They lived their life in a certain way because they believed that truth. They saw that city. They wanted to be a part of that city that God was building. And if you're listening to this and you are just, comfortable and happy with your life as it is, with this world as it is, then, what I'm sharing probably won't mean much to you or make much sense to you. But I know, and I can imagine there's a lot of you listening that are feeling hopeless, that are feeling dissatisfied. When you look at the world around you and the world as it is, there is I believe, a godly dissatisfaction that rises up in you. Um, you know, these days I'm hearing this phrase a lot or reading this phrase a lot, in the news or just in, different articles or whatever, but how people are feeling, the phrase they use is politically homeless, right? Especially after this last election, they're just feeling like, I don't feel like there is a political party out there that really represents my values or represents what I'm looking for. And so people are frustrated. People are feeling hopeless because they're wondering, is there a place for me? Is there, and they're expressing that feeling, how, and saying they feel politically homeless. Others are saying they're feeling spiritually homeless, right? When they look at the churches, at least the churches in the United States at this moment, we're in an interesting time where I think just so many issues are coming to the forefront. Issues of power and abuse and sexism and racism and so many things that are happening, and moral failings of leaders. Just hypocrisy, hidden sin, all these kind of things are really coming to a head at this moment. And again, it's not that these things have never happened in the past, but it just feels like such an intense moment right now. And I think the sentiment among a lot of people is, they're feeling spiritually homeless. They just don't see a church out there that looks like them or looks like it cares about them, values them, or sees them and is listening to their concerns or listening to their hopes. And for anyone out there who's listening, who can relate to those feelings, and again, maybe you don't feel politically hopeless, maybe you don't feel spiritually homeless, maybe you just feel homeless, period. Not in a literal sense, but you just look around at this world and the ways of this world, and the present state of this world, and you just say, God, there's got to be something better. Is this all there is? And that's why this truth is so important. That's why this is good news. That's why this is a truth that you can build your life upon, because the good news is that there is a better country for you. There is a better city for you. There is a city whose builder and maker is God, and God is building something in the midst of all this chaos, in the midst of all this, hopelessness. God is building a better city, a better country, and it's not just for, those people like Abraham. It's not just for those other, heroes of the faith. It's for anyone who is willing to say, I'm not satisfied with this world the way that it is. I'm not just, I don't accept that this is all that there is. And you choose to believe that God is doing and is going to do what he said he would do. And it's just amazing, the city that God is building. All are welcome there. It doesn't matter your age, your gender, your ethnicity, your socioeconomic status. He invites all to come, and the citizenship is given to you as a free gift. You don't have to earn it. You don't have to. All you have to do is receive it. All you have to do is lay aside your pride and your self-sufficiency, and admit that you can't do it on your own, and that you need something outside of yourself. And if you choose to believe that and receive that free gift that God is giving you, you are invited in, you are welcomed in. And in this city, all are loved, all are valued, all are seen. It's better than any utopia that philosophers could imagine, or it's just, it sounds too good to be true in many ways, and yet it is true. Um, and this truth, again, it's so important. It will help us to stay faithful and obedient to God, um, because again, people who choose to obey God at a great cost, it's not just because they're just more disciplined, or they don't care. They just are, you know denying themselves just for the sake of denying themselves, or they're just unusually faithful people. No, it's because there's something better for us, and if we can keep our eyes fixed on that, um, we can stay faithful even though it costs us everything. You know, uh, the the Bible, it says that Jesus endured the cross. He endured the pain of the cross, the scorn of the cross, not just because he was so strong, though of course he was, but because it was for the joy set before him. He saw something, he saw a greater joy ahead of him that was totally worth all of the pain, everything that he had to endure. And because he kept his eyes fixed on that, he was able to stay faithful, he was able to endure. And if we can do the same, it will help us to persevere through persecution, through disappointment, through just anything that this world can throw at us. Um, and again, this truth does not mean that we don't care about this world. We just check out and we just hang on and wait for that new world that is to come. And there is another age coming. There is a new world coming, a better world coming. But until that day, we love our neighbor, we do good, we work for the welfare of our cities, our nations, but we do it from a place of knowing that there is a better world coming. We love our neighbor and we love this world, knowing that this world in its current form is not the be all end all. And again, if you are, feeling that dissatisfaction, that hopelessness, that's good news to you. You already know that. Actually, that this world isn't all there is, or at least you hope that this isn't all there is, because if that's true, then we are we have good reason to be hopeless. But when we understand that there is a city whose builder and maker is God, um, we can have hope, we can endure. And I don't know about you, but I want to be a part of that city that God is building. I want to be a part of what God is building. And I do believe that there are things he is tearing down, and I don't want to perpetuate any of that. I don't want to cling on to the things that God is trying to tear down or get rid of. But I want to be a part of that city. I want to be a part of that pure and spotless bride that God is preparing for himself. I want to be a part of that city that God is building. And so I invite you to put your hope and set your eyes on that city as well. I believe it will help you tremendously. And yeah, this is good news. This is a truth to surely build our lives upon. Thank you so much for listening. I pray that this blesses you. We'll see you next time.